What's happening, folks? I don't have a street photography POV video this week, but I do have some new photobooks / new-ish photobooks that I want to talk about and explain why I think photobooks are essential for learning and making you a better photographer. I don't know what the title is going to be yet, like why photobooks improve your photography or why photobooks make you better or something like that. But essentially, photobooks led me to look at photography a little bit differently. The lack of like a backlit screen, the way it's presented is different. The pictures tend to look a bit different, and you can sort of like, it's easier to linger with them a little bit longer and kind of like see the details and understand what it is about the picture that made someone put it in a book or why they chose it for the series. And just somehow it allows me to absorb and kind of draw from it for my own work as well. And as much as I try to understand and articulate why, and as much as I tried to like really understand and articulate why I think photobooks make you into a better photographer, I'm unable to like, it's too nuanced. I can't really like exactly lay my finger on what it is yet. And maybe that will never happen. Maybe I'm just not experienced enough yet to really understand why. But let's talk about the new books that I got, and maybe that will help you to understand as well, or just take an interest in these books. So the first one is by Matt Stewart, and it's called Into the Fire. This was a book that he made after spending a few months in the desert in a place called Slab City. It's like an off-grid place. And while Matt Stewart is a street photographer, this is more like a documentary project that he took on and shot it in a very Matt Stewart kind of way. So it's still full of random little details and things you wouldn't expect, but also kind of peppered with some portraits and like scenes without people in them, and just like the weird sort of things that Matt Stewart might look for in the streets, but translating it into this desert stuff. I will say one thing, there were far more penises in this than I expected to see, so that was surprising when that showed up. And straight away, even just one of the first images in the book, there's this Slab City welcome sort of booth area. There's a little kid walking in front of the booth, two dogs playing in the street. You see like some RVs in the background. But then there's this one random person's arm just sticking out holding like a pretty big knife. So it's got this weird ominous kind of feeling. And that kind of sets the tone for the oddness of the rest of the book. So yeah, Matt Stewart, Into the Fire, got it from Satanta Books. And yeah, well worth it. Good little investment, I think, because Matt Stewart is a really good like contemporary photographer. The next one I got is actually a zine by a guy called Josh Edgoose from London. He is pretty well known Instagram photographer actually, but is also like not part of that, I don't know what to say, like mainstream Instagram photography community. He's a real street photographer. He's for several years he's been documenting his life around the area that he lives in London. Has eventually came up with this little zine, and it's nice. There's like a lot of, it starts off with a few landscape type stuff and then moves into more city scenes. And one thing that sort of runs common throughout the whole thing is the colours. They're all very, very similar. There's a lot of red and sort of lightish blue tones in here. It's not like the usual London, sort of central London photography that you might see. It's a little bit more suburban, a little further out, but still looks very much like the sort of London outskirts that you know. And I think one of the things about Josh's work is that it looks like work that you could do yourself. Like you might think to yourself, oh, I could totally do this. This would be pretty easy. I could make work like this. But when you try and do it, I think over time you'll find that it's not as easy as you think, because there's, again, the colors are similar all the way running through it. So getting that sort of thread of similarity is one thing, but then finding the scenes and the people in the scenes and the random things that are different. So I've got this one picture here where there's a guy fixing like the overhang of like a shop, maybe a bakery or something like that. And then in the background, there's someone setting up a blue tent and fixing the side of the blue tent. So there's that like connection between those two things. And that's what makes these pictures good, I think. There's like just a little bit of oddity or just something that's not that easy to find or repeat in all of the pictures. And this man here sitting on a chair outside, I'm guessing outside his house, but his socks and shoes match the drain pipe and the door of the house. Those like colour matches and things like that are what stands out the most to me in this book. So yeah, nice little zine, gives you a sort of gives you an idea of what life looks like on the outskirts of London. This is pretty cool. The last recent book that I bought, actually probably bought it a couple months ago, but it's so big I haven't really made my way through it very much. And there's actually a lot of reading in this book as well, and I'm absolutely terrible at reading, so it's taken me forever to get through anything. But it's Bystander, A History of Street Photography by Colin Westerbeck and Joel Meyerowitz. I've always enjoyed Joel Meyerowitz's work, but this is not a book about his work. It's basically almost like a history of photography in its entirety. There's even a chapter that's before photography and pictures from way back in the day before people could really just carry around a small camera. I do find it a little bit hard to read so far. I haven't always followed everything that it's talking about, and pictures sometimes are on different pages that it's referring to, or I think sometimes it talks about pictures that are maybe not even in the book, but it's just a great compilation of street photographs by lots and lots of different photographers over a long period of time. And you can start to see influences from today's photographers, and you'll see work that's like, oh wow, that looks like the same thing that people are doing on Instagram now, as if it hasn't been around that long, and here's someone in the 1950s composing something in a similar sort of way. So it can sometimes give you the feeling that everything is just being repeated and nothing is really new, but I don't think that's the case. Although a bunch of stuff will be repeated, there's always new stuff going to be made. The world looks different, the world changes, and it's always, there's going to be an infinite number of different things that can happen and will happen. So I don't think it's any reason to be discouraged about it, and trying to replicate these old photos are sometimes a way of like working through the process of learning as well. So I haven't really came to a verdict on it yet, since I've made it through so little of it. And while I'm saying on one hand that photo books make you a better photographer, and on the other hand that I can't really articulate why they make you a better photographer, I don't really know of any photographer who's gotten into photo books and not gotten something out of it that they've felt has informed their photography and improved their photography over any period of time. The first book that I bought was this Saw Lighter early colour book, and at the time I liked to shoot longer focal lengths most of the time and almost kind of try and replicate the kind of stuff that you see in his book. He tends to abstract things a lot more. There's a lot of reflection kind of stuff. That was the kind of thing that I was into, and I mean I still kind of am into this. I really like this kind of work. But I've found that carrying around something with a 35mm focal length has been at least more my speed just now. I've been enjoying that kind of thing, but it's always been good to have these little takeaways. And I even find that things like this inform my wedding photography, and I'll make abstract things and have out of focus elements in pictures. And even though this like this type of thing, shooting through something like that and adding that like layer of abstraction and complexity to the scene has been something that I've done even with 35mm. Even if I'm not shooting longer focal lengths, I've still found it useful. And especially in times like this when the world's kind of upside down and maybe you don't have access to the busier streets that you used to have, or maybe you just never had access to them anyways, and learning from photo books can sometimes give you ideas about how to adapt things to your environment that you're in. Even this book that I've had for almost as long. Maybe I got it at the same time as the Saw Lighter book, this Fred Herzog book. It didn't resonate with me that much at first, and I'm not even sure if I looked through the entire book. Maybe I think I did. But now when I look back through it again, I'm understanding a little bit more what he was doing, because there's city scenes that are just wide, and there's not really any detail, like not any specific subject in them. And then there's like close-up scenes and lots of different stuff, and most of it was shot I think in his hometown, but then there's some in like Cuba and Guatemala and stuff like that as well. But there's just this thread of similarity over time, like, and God, how do I explain it? Like, you'll see sort of, you'll see kind of portrait stuff like this. Not really, it's like a street candid portrait, I guess. And then, you know, not that far away, see a few of those, and then, you know, a few pages later, it's just, you're just a storefront, and there's nothing. This is just an advertisement, but it kind of builds up that picture of that place and that time and what he saw. Or like scenes like this. I see people doing things like this all the time on Instagram now, and this is something that someone has been doing 50 years ago. So again, while none of us are necessarily creating new work, we're creating our own versions of this type of work in a different place, different scenes, different lights, different color combinations, and I think it's good to know like where these might have came from. And I'm sure Fred Herzog was inspired by someone else from way back in the day as well. All right, at the risk of talking too long, because I don't know how much of this I'm going to cut out, I think I'll call it a day there. So yeah, Joe Meyerowitz, Colin Westerbeck, Bystander, seems like a good book. This zine by Josh Edgoose, I don't think you can really go wrong with a Matt Stewart book these days. I wish I'd known about him early enough to have got his All That Life Can Afford book. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video, which I will try to make sure is actually a POV. I'm going out shooting tomorrow. There's a protest in Denver. I'm gonna go and take pictures there, I think, so hopefully it'll be good. Cheers.